What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Opinionated Idiot YouTube channel. It's Saturday night. I hope everybody's having a fantastic Saturday evening. And I came across a really fascinating video this morning, and I want to play that video for you guys. We'll play it through and do some commentary. It was a video segment that was on a YouTube channel from Tyler Feller, and he had a FBI and high-profile attorney Dale Carson on his channel, and they talked about the timing of the alleged crime in Idaho, the alleged timing of Bryan Kohberger, his actions throughout the crime. And he said that it literally essentially almost took 6 minutes, but he's going to break that down. And I love to hear this because it's a great perspective from an attorney and someone that was former FBI profiler. So let's pull that video up. I'm not going to take too long here. We'll get right into it this evening. And I think this is going to be really great. So shout out to Tyler Feller. I hope you don't mind me using the segment on my channel to go through. You did some really great work over here. And please go over and subscribe to his channel. He's got a great, amazing channel over there. And I'm fully in support of what he's doing over there. So let's play through this.
And we see so many people we know were guilty being let off in our judicial system, and we see a lot of innocent people that are guilty wrongfully that need to be set free. Now, Chowder sends a question, and it'd be interesting considering your criminal defense background, but maybe more so your FBI background. Is the time of going into the house around 4:04 and being out of the house by 4:17 a.m. and in the car by 4:20 a.m.
I think this has always been the most questionable thing in this, and I think that's why he's asking this question, is because there's such a short window of time. I gave it around between 14 and 16 minutes. I think I actually got it down to about 14 minutes, and it's going to be great to hear the perspective here from this attorney and this former FBI profiler. So let's play through this.
4 murders in 15 minutes, or less. How have you processed that?
We've actually calculated the time out, and it's about 6 minutes. But human response
So
time,
essentially what he's saying is that, we have the timeline of between 14 and 16 minutes. He's saying that it took essentially 6 minutes to commit the crime of killing 4 people. 6 minutes.
time's about a quarter of a second. So have you ever heard of the OODA loop?
No, I'm not familiar with that concept.
If there's a danger, you orient to the noise, okay? And then you observe it, right?
What is the real story of January 6th? Many people have asked that question.
Then you determine if there's a danger to it, and you make a decision, and then you act. So that takes about a second. So you don't break it up into minutes, the stabbings. You break it up into seconds. And so going into a house where I've got to know that the doors were all unlocked. I mean, it's a home, but locking the door is not something that young people tend to do a lot.
And we knew that about that area because it's such a small town and small community. I mean, people came and go out of those houses, almost like left and right. It was almost on like an hourly or minutely basis. Because I remember when the initial focus was down there from the news media, they're saying that, people are coming at all hours of the night. I mean, we even see it in some of the body cam footage that has been released over those couple of months of just all the house parties. I mean, you're in a college town. I mean, I've spent many of times in my younger years in college towns. I mean, people are coming and going on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, and throughout the week, but basically on weekend nights at just all hours. I mean, it just never stops.
Odd. And it's fairly clear to me that the ones who survived probably did have locked doors, but he was able to get in, and it's unclear whether he started at the 3rd floor, which I doubt. I think he started at the 2nd floor because that was his access to the back of the house, which he was familiar with.
Yeah.
He was familiar with it because he was sitting in his car behind that hillock on a number of occasions. This is just my view, looking into the back of the house, because that's what voyeurs do.
Yeah.
Right. They look.
And we know that he was, we know that Kohberger was in that area, months up to the actual incident itself. So
They look and they process in their mind. And this concept that you had to have some direct personal relationship with people is just, well, that's ridiculous. I just saw a news report earlier today that a well-known star, a woman who is a model and a golfer, was saying that
this is actually really interesting. I want you guys to take note of this. This is a really interesting part in this video.
In Instagram, these people would ask her out on a date first, and then when she didn't respond to them, they would say they would want to kill her.
And that's an initial to get the response, to get some kind of interaction with that specific person. And as we know, and we talked about in some of my earlier videos, it's been confirmed now that Kohberger was in touch with the 3 girls inside that house via Instagram. He messaged them repeatedly, and especially one of the girls repeatedly. They haven't, and I believe it was Kaylee, but I think that has been since confirmed. But we do know that did happen, but the account has been deleted since then.
So there's this dichotomy that's going on there.
I hate you, I love you, I love you, I hate you.
That's exactly what's going on.
Virtual. I mean, this is
to get a reaction,
right?
Yeah.
And so this may have been the case here. It's virtual.
Yeah.
There's no contact. Maybe the Instagram's going to turn out to be the case. I don't know.
Yeah.
But even
there
if
was contact through Instagram, has been confirmed.
It was just, I met you one time, or I met you girls one time, and you all, which is really unwise to do if this in fact happened.
Right.
You can't just blow people off, but you also can't befriend everybody you see and give them eye contact and a smile. That's not an appropriate response either. But you never want to denigrate someone, because there are people who will take that the wrong way.
I'm wondering if the FBI lies publicly, and in particular in this case, there was those 2 moments.
So we're going to talk about here in this segment. I remember this. He's going to talk about the 2 stops in Indiana and if the FBI had any involvement. And he's going to, they talk about, first there was a report that the FBI was aiding in the investigation, and then afterwards they said that they weren't aiding in the investigation. I tend to believe that they were aiding in the investigation. For the reason that they say that they weren't, I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with the case itself, but I'd be curious, again, Dale will follow up on that, and he makes some really great points inside
in Indiana. In about 10 minutes, Bryan Kohberger was pulled over. The initial report that was widely reported by pretty reputable sources was saying the FBI delegated those 2 stops. FBI came out, went through some means, and said we had nothing to do with that. I want to get your take on it. Do you think the FBI was directing the Indiana State Police to try to,
I personally do,
try to stop that white Hyundai Elantra to get some ID, either through body cam footage or a picture of the driver's license?
It only makes sense. I think they were on to him, days, weeks before. They already had an idea of something, of him.
Well, here's what there are 2 things that I think. One is they were tracking him from Idaho.
They knew
to his home in Pennsylvania, right?
How to store and sort all your photos and videos in seconds.
Thank you very much.
No computer knowledge required.
All right, let's keep playing through this.
I think they were tracking. But the way tracking goes on is by aircraft and by loose surveillance. Okay, there's an actual team that does this sort of thing for the FBI. And that team would want to make absolutely certain, if they, by some error, it's a long distance, by the way, it's about 2,500 miles.
It's a long distance.
You could easily lose somebody. You get in bad weather, you want to make sure you're following the right car, right? I don't know if you ever searched for anything with an aircraft, but I have. And identifying things on the ground can be very difficult.
It's hard.
Just a white car is very difficult to identify. So it may have been an effort to make sure that and the Bureau would, I hope, deny this, to make sure they were following the right car.
Yeah.
I think one of the stops may have been what we call a whisper stop, where they're asked to stop somebody. But the purpose of stopping them is to check that. And maybe you put a tracker on your toe, one of these things that we now all carry around with us, and put it on the car. I mean, I just don't know what technology, but I can assure you that there's no way in the world that the FBI following this kid would have been able to explain losing him.
Yeah.
Okay. So, they're absolutely going to follow him. The second stop, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
But
there was a directive out there, which is, quite possibly the case. And somebody got to him and didn't have time to radio ahead to anybody else, say, hey, we've done the stop. That's a thought that I had.
No, I don't think that happened. But I also think this. It's rather interesting. He didn't flee.
It's true.
There was some news reports. The reason for the particular stops before the FBI said that they weren't involved was they wanted to get some video camera footage, possible video camera footage, one, to ID him, and two, to try to get some video footage of his hands. I probably to see if there's any type of cuts or abrasions or bruises on them.
Now,
and that is interesting.
Killed 4 people, and I realize there's a lapse of time here.
Yeah.
If you just killed a bunch of people and the police stopped you once, you go, oh God.
Yeah.
And you might even, if you're armed, you might shoot the officer. I mean, that happened.
Yeah.
Traffic stops are the most dangerous thing we police do.
Yeah.
And domestic violence cases. You take your pick, both are bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you never know who you're stopping in a car.
Right.
You're generally by yourself. You've reported the tag number and your location, the description of the car, but you're by yourself.
Yep.
So if the car is loaded and they're ready to go.
Everybody that's just jumped in on the stream, I'll get you caught up a little bit. Watching a segment from Tyler Feller's YouTube channel. Please go over and support his channel. He's got a really great channel. This is an attorney, a high-powered attorney, and former FBI profiler. His name is Dale Carson, and they're talking specifically about the Bryan Kohberger murder case. And obviously, you guys know what's going on with all of that, but it's great to hear this interesting perspective from, an attorney, just some practices, policy, procedures, and just some thoughts on, what he thinks about the case.
So you're going to be hurt.
Yeah.
That's always a concern for law enforcement. So I think when they may have stopped him the first time and gotten some information about who he was and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me. One of the things I warn people in my defense practice about is to just not talk to police.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the police.
Me too.
But it just,
I'm very pro police, but I always say that if you're in any type of situation where you're being accused of a crime and they detain you or talk to you, just say, I need to talk with a lawyer. I've always said that.
Can't talk to them. And there was dialogue between the father and son in the car and law enforcement, not once, but twice.
Yeah.
I found that kind of remarkable. And as a defense attorney, I'd say, well, he didn't flee when the police tried to stop him.
Yeah. He went home. He was chilling for several days after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of that is not consistent with.
I've been getting paid $1,000 a month, if not more, just from this app on my phone.
Yeah.
An organized killer.
Yeah.
But what is consistent is leaving the area after a period of time and coordinating that in advance.
Right. Was there anything weird to you about the response time between 4:20 a.m. when the murders took place and the 911 call that was roughly,
For me, there was a lot of questions about that.
7.5 hours later?
Well, I can think of a number of reasons for that to happen. Okay.
And I say that because I've had to continue to tell folks all over the internet. I've been one of the loudest voices saying that we have no idea the trauma the individuals inside the house were up against, and it's not our place to shame them or anything like that. In my opinion,
I don't think it's shaming, and I have to disagree with this. I don't think it's shaming. I think it's discussing and wanting to know more facts and more evidence of what actually went on. And there's nothing wrong with that. This whole thing with people shaming now, if you have an opinion, it's always shaming. If you don't go with the narrative, it's always shaming. Well, I still have questions, and I'm going to have questions because I'm opinionated and I'm going to ask questions. And, fuck all this bullshit about sensitivity and all that. Listen, there's almost an 8-hour gap in between when 4 people were brutally murdered up to when a 911 call was placed. I have questions. Why? Why did it take that long? It's just like if a police officer or a detective was interrogating or asking questions of this specific person that was there. You had 2 people that survived. Why did it take you that long? There's nothing wrong with that. You're not shaming. You're just asking questions. So we'll play on.
And the 2 women who were inside the house were victims as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You don't
They
have
are
to agree
victims. Of course they were victims. But, it's okay to ask questions.
me.
Yeah. No. Okay. So to begin with, we don't know the state of inebriation of any of the people that are involved. We will know that about the individuals who were knifed.
That's right.
Because post-mortem, you breathe out alcohol, and if you're not breathing, the alcohol remains the same in your blood. So we'll know those things. But if you're intoxicated, or if you're taking an illicit,
what do you guys think? Do you think it's wrong to ask questions of this time lapse, this gap? Let me know in the chat. What do you guys think? Is it wrong to continue as? Is that shaming to ask questions? Am I wrong?
To alter your perception of reality?
Yeah.
Which always seems crazy to me, because we're already the apex predators. Why would we disassemble the finest creation that ever existed on this planet in favor of modifying your perception of reality? But that is another point. But if they, and remember, they're in a house where there's a lot of partying going on.
That's right.
All the time. So if you hear strange noises, maybe that wasn't all that unusual.
Yeah.
We know it's unusual now.
Yeah.
But to argue that they knew it meant that.
Dane, what's funny is I covered the protest last night. And it was funny. I was going to do a night 2 of it, but there's no live streams this evening. But I found one on Facebook, and it's funny that you talked about cashing in and gaining notoriety. There was a live stream on Facebook of a gentleman that was out protesting this evening of the Tyree Nichols, the brutal beating and ultimate, his had to end his life. And I watched the video today. It's extremely hard to watch. Those cops went way too far. But I was watching this live stream, and in the chat, the person that's out there protesting, is disgusting, puts his Cash App tag, and it's like, Cash App me. I'm like, seriously, bro? Like, are you really out there for the cause? Are you trying to make money? It's just disgusting. Super disgusting stuff.
4 people had been murdered is a little bit over the top. That's not the case. And often in investigations, we find out information later that you go, well, my goodness, why wouldn't they be aware of it? Well, how couldn't they know? And the answer is they live in a world where there's a lot of noise and activity. We've seen one film of the police responding to a noise complaint. I mean, clearly it's a bunch of college kids, in an off-campus house having fun. There's a lot of noise and music and strange noises.
100%,
perhaps.
dude.
Who knows?
100%.
Right.
But this one child, who's a young lady who's there, she can't be, she's not the key to this. This problem was created by an outside person. It may have been this individual. He's certainly accused, but he's not convicted at this juncture. So if she was slightly inebriated and she saw some guy walking through the house, he wasn't, she certainly didn't have the equipment to analyze whether or not he was a murderer.
The thing that I just really have to still ask questions. I mean, they're saying, oh, inebriation, and she saw this guy, and she said in quote that seeing this person, and allegedly, if this is Bryan Kohberger, that she was in a frozen, shocked phase, that it scared her enough that she froze. So that there's more going on, in my opinion. There's more going on.
And it just left the house killing people. She's not in the position. She may have gone back to bed after hearing the noise and the racket and seeing some other guy in the house without a fear that he's dangerous.
Right.
But she
People
said she
apparently
was
were going
afraid.
through that house often. The code of the door was well known.
Right.
So
to me, if you're in a frozen, shocked phase, that's fear. So you were fearful of this person you saw.
And there may have been other instances of people just being in the house, meeting with somebody. I mean, we don't know enough about the house. And one reason to delay reporting it is to conceal evidence or to remove evidence. So let's just say you're having a tremendous party at the house and there are people using illicit substances, okay? And in the morning, you look around the house and there's all kinds of.
I've been looking for a product like this my whole life.
I wear this product every day.
We were all putting it on, looking.
Evidence of criminal behavior around the house. You want to try to clean that up before the police come, right?
That's true.
But that doesn't make sense, because wouldn't you see the dead bodies at that point?
Yeah.
And so that could be another reason for the delay. I mean, there's
so
no.
You're going to be worried about, let's just say it's some pot. You're going to be worried about hiding some pot, and you're going to be stepping around and over dead bodies to hide pot. That doesn't make any sense. I'm just saying, like, let's just say it's pot. Even if it was anything else, mushroom, whatever, like, you're going to step around dead bodies to go hide all that shit. I don't see that happening.
No way of telling. The police ultimately will find out because they conduct interviews.
That's right.
They will know ultimately who was in the house and who wasn't.
And again, this is the thing too, is I'm getting a lot of shit on my channel lately that, someone was trying to say, like, the cops are in on this and all this other shit. And I'm like, dude, you're like way off. The thing that people have to understand is that the evidence that's been given out there into the public, what we have had so far that we know about this case, and we have a certain amount of facts that have been being put out there, that has been put out there. And then all we can do is sit back and only speculate at this point, because we don't know the full story. And people have to understand that we're not going to hear the full story. I mean, there is probably a mountain of evidence out there that we haven't even heard in this case yet. Like, people, there's everything is circumstantial and fucking, they don't have anything on this guy, and this guy's going to walk. You don't even know. Listen, they have a car. They have his car. Do you think that the FBI is not going to tear apart that fucking car and look completely through it and swab it up and down for DNA? And I'm going to tell you right now, if there is one speck of DNA, any blood, tissue, sample, skin, anything of any of these 4 victims in that car, dude, Kohberger is going to go down so hard, it's not even funny. So, everybody's got to pause here a little bit instead of fucking attacking me about, well, I don't know anything. This, like, dude, there is so much evidence, and you have to realize there's been a gag order put on this case so that no attorney or anybody directly involved with this case is allowed to talk. So we're not going to hear the full evidence until this goes to trial, or maybe they make a deal. We may never hear anything. Maybe Kohberger makes a deal. The evidence is mounting up. It's not looking good. His attorney looks at him and makes the suggestion like, hey, dude, probably might want to take a plea deal on this because you're going to go down hard and there's really no way that I can defend you on this. So, that's the thing is people have to pump the brakes a little bit because right now all we can do is just mull over what information that we have and just speculate and give our thoughts and ideas to what happened. That's my rant.
Because as you'll recall, look, the first call was apparently to somebody to come help, right? Not police. All right. So the police officer, before the police officer gets there, there are all kinds of people in the house, right? Is it either Friday or Saturday morning? I can't remember which it was.
It was
Sunday.
It was Sunday morning when it happened.
So Saturday night, there are all kinds of Sunday morning now. They called their friends to help clean up the mess. And then that's when they discover that someone is unresponsive. And I don't know whether that's someone dead or whether that's which would certainly make them unresponsive, or it's this girl who was in a comatose state from fear.
That's good.
I don't know. But either way, when the police come, think about the contamination of evidence in the house. I mean, you got all these other people there. The police come, and he didn't throw everybody out of the house because he's just responding to an unresponsive person, right? So leaning over his shoulder, looking into the room to see what's going on and talking and bringing in DNA and other things not connected with the actual crime. So I'm stunned. For example, they certainly found other DNA in the house other than what was purportedly on that sheath. But if they hadn't found it on that sheath, if they had not found that, and the other WSU,
if that sheath was never left there, this case would go really cold. That DNA helped big time.
Few people had not found that car.
That's right.
If those things hadn't happened,
no
one would have known to follow him.
It'd be a cold
we had
case.
that problem with the Atlanta kid killing. We stopped him on the bridge.
And I'll be honest with you, I think just up to almost a couple of days, when Kohberger was named as a suspect number one, I was like, I think this case is going to go cold.
Couldn't find any reason to detain him. We let him go home. It was a day or two later before we put the surveillance on him that we did. And in the interval, he went home and discarded a whole bunch of material. And we know now from neighbors that would have been very important in determining the Atlanta kid killings, motives, and other things.
I think that's really good.
If you're 45 and older and live in the United States and you still don't have life insurance.
We have a question from Kristen. She's wanting to know about advances in the way that they're able to process DNA technology. She said, do you think that older cases, like, for example, Natalie Wood, would possibly be reopened and evaluated through the lens of some of the new DNA technology you're talking about?
It's before they just get in this, and it's funny that they're talking about this. Around where I live, there's a case right now that some DNA testing had been tested on some evidence that was in a case, and a gentleman right now has been falsely, they 100% have not matched him to the crime. He's said he was innocent for like 30 years, and DNA evidence basically has essentially going to set him free. The issue that he has is he has problems with his visa right now, so they can't let him out of jail, but essentially he should be walking out of jail. And this is kind of a big case that's going on right now, but he basically has been in prison the last 30 years, falsely accused. And then, like I said, they retested some DNA, and it 100% exonerated him from the crime. So DNA testing is so advanced now and so far on that it's just an amazing thing what they can do with it now.
Talking about?
Well, yeah, absolutely. The problem is whether or not the evidence that was original.
So Danger says the case wouldn't have gone cold. There's things like security cameras that could be checked out. Also, detectives have to do is file a warrant for the phones in the area. Yeah, that's true. But the thing is, all of that stuff would be essentially like circumstantial evidence. The really hard evidence was the DNA evidence on that sheath, and then leaving the sheath behind. Yeah, geofencing. Yep, exactly. But that DNA really locked
originally
in.
generated in the case has been maintained.
In the case of Bryan Kohberger, they obviously listed in the probable cause affidavit, like you're talking about the sheath. Is it standard procedure that there would be multiple pieces of DNA that would match Bryan Kohberger, but they wouldn't list it in the probable cause affidavit? Or would
Sure.
the...
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And the reason is,
and this is what I talked about. I mean, people don't even know. There's probably mountains of evidence in this case that just have not been listed, released to the public. Because why are you going to let that out there? If I release everything, if I have my cards like this in a poker game, okay, and that's the purpose of poker is that when I'm playing my opponent, I don't want him to see my cards to see what I have. Why would the DA go like this and show the defense attorneys everything they have? They would win. Or they would be able to mount a strong defense.
that they only need enough to get a judge to sign
off on the warrant.
That's it. So this is minimization. Now, minimization is used in other contexts entirely, but that's what this is. This is just the reasons an officer believes someone should be arrested. And if a judge will sign off on it, then they're good to go.
Danger says, why was the sheath left behind? Says a lot about the state of mind of the killer was at the time. Absolutely. Probably something like he took the blade out, probably placed it down, did something, or maybe in that struggle or whatever, it fell off his body. And then what I think is that, he committed the murders, he left, and then started to head back to his house. I don't know if you know this, Danger. Through geofencing, he went back to the residence at 9 o'clock in the morning. He was in the area. So maybe he got back, realized like, oh shit, I left where's the sheath? Where's the sheath? And maybe went back to retrieve it. Or, and the other theory is he went back to see if there was any activity around the house. I think he went back to retrieve the sheath. Retrieve the sheath. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Bingo. Yep. And they have all that. They have all that in the affidavit. It's already it's in there.
And you don't want to add additional information if you've looked at the affidavit, which I'm sure you have. There are no named FBI agents in the thing.
Right.
It's true.
And there's a reason for that.
Right.
You can't subpoena somebody that you don't know.
Yep.
And subpoenaing FBI agents.
Yep. I agree, Danger. I 100% agree.
U.S. attorney frequently resists any kind of
exposure.
Expose FBI agents.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, I'm wondering too about, just as we're talking about things that are standard procedure, there's something I've been asking literally every guest that we've had, and I haven't been able to get a solid answer. It's like somebody says one thing, another person says another thing. So you may help sway me. But when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, the only thing that we know he said besides he wants to be eagerly exonerated did you arrest anyone else?
Yep.
When we read the probable cause affidavit, it refers to him as suspect number one, and they refer to his vehicle as vehicle number one. And then in discovery, his criminal defense team asked the question as part
this is really great questions, because there's been some speculation out there that the day that Kohberger left, there was an armed gunman that actually, I believe, ended up getting killed at Washington State University on the day that he left with his dad to drive back to Pennsylvania. There was an incident, and if you go back and watch the security, the body cam footage of one of the stops, and I believe it was the first stop, his father actually talks about that with the police officer, like, oh, we just left, and have you heard about what's going on? There has been some theories out there, or conspiracy theories, that this person may have been involved and Kohberger and him work together. So I wonder if they're actually going to bring up that theory here, but we'll play through and see what they think, what he says.
Part of their protocol. are there any co-defendants? Is
Well,
that standard procedure, or is there potential that there's an accomplice?
Well, look, the way this is supposed to work.
I've been getting paid $1,000 a month, if not more.
Thanks for that
just from
commercial
this
break.
app on my phone.
Is that defense attorneys are going to get all the evidence that the government has developed and generated and uncovered in a case like this. The problem is, as a defense attorney, you have to know what to ask for. Oftentimes, attorneys not well versed in the behavior of law enforcement or the federal law enforcement don't know precisely what to ask for.
Yeah.
So that's somewhat problematic. Now, the government's supposed to provide you with what's known as Brady material, which would be any kind of information that might suggest that my client is innocent, right?
Yeah.
And so the problem today is this, and I want you to just put your thinking cap on about this, because this is really important, okay? You only have to turn over what you're going to use.
Yeah.
Okay? And you don't, even though there are requirements that they turn over everything, there are technologies available today which far exceed the knowledge of every defense attorney.
Yeah.
Again, if you don't know to ask for it, and you don't ask for it, and it exists, and it may or may not be Brady. You see, the problem with information that may support the innocence of your client is you don't know what that is, right?
Yeah.
And so if you don't have everything the government has, everything, then it's very difficult to effectively protect your client, because some of them are innocent.
I talked about
Many
this.
guilty, some innocent, right?
So then you would ask a question like, is there a co-defendant? Because you don't know what they know, and you might not even think there is one.
And I always thought that Kohberger said that to maybe throw off the police, to try to get the police off his tail, or, throw the scent off him, and maybe throw the police more into like maybe there is another person that's involved in this.
But it's kind of standard procedure to say.
No, in this particular case, it's fairly clear who that co-defendant would be, right? It's his father.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his father went and picked up someone who's accused of horrendous murder and drove him across the country.
Yeah.
So you would arrest the father because you would expect he had information or he certainly provided assistance to his departure, right?
It's true.
In the federal system alone, there is unlawful flight to avoid prosecution or unlawful flight to avoid confinement. There are two. He was charged unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. He was charged with that. So he's in a flight status.
Right.
So if you render aid to someone who's in flight status, you're assisting them. So quite reasonably, his father could have been arrested. Now, there's also state law in Florida, particularly.
And keep in mind, this guy had a PhD in criminology. I mean, it wasn't the most, if Kohberger is allegedly Kohberger is the suspect in this and did these crimes allegedly, that it would be a technique to do that, because he knows police interrogation. He knows the police system. So, being able to maybe throw things out like that to throw the scent off, you, and say, hey, maybe there is, maybe to question police again, maybe there is another person involved in this, or maybe this is not, not the person.
In Idaho, or in Pennsylvania, which says that if you are connected to an individual by blood, right, you probably can get away with helping them.
Yeah.
Certainly mothers can.
Yeah.
Fathers, that's another issue, and they're, depending on how far out you go, those people don't have grounds to suggest that they are exempt from the aiding and abetting statute.
Right. Well, that makes sense. So, but do you, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but do you think his dad knew about what had happened?
What is the real story of January 6th? Many people have asked that question.
But I don't think there's any way to tell that.
Yeah.
I think that knowing older folks as I do, being one myself, our ability to hide a reaction when stopped by the police would be less than we would want it to be. In other words, we'd be panicked out of our minds. And I don't think the father was panicked when they got stopped by law enforcement.
That's true. It's a good point. I think Bryan Kohberger had a scare on his face.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, if he's guilty, I mean, well, hey, you get stopped by the police, how do you think your face looks?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I used to, well, I wrote literally hundreds and hundreds of tickets when I was a cop in Miami. And, you know, and made just many, many arrests as a result of the tickets. And back in my time, if you were using marijuana, it was a felony, and you use the number of arrests you get to help you on your way to being a detective, because a detective can dress like Crockett and Tubbs, and you have a hideaway gun and an unmarked car, and you're the top of the top at that point.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to move from being a street officer to being a detective for those reasons. There are others, but it's important. And I think that in this circumstance, the failure to actually arrest somebody leads me to believe that the government was somehow involved in that initial stop.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
The second
I mean,
one,
I've said that all along.
We have some questions coming in. This one's coming from Amy Heights. She's saying, do you have any thoughts on him returning to the scene at 9 a.m.?
Well, I don't think it's unusual at all for people who are engaged in criminal activity to see what their behavior has wrought.
Mm-hmm.
So that certainly happens in fire cases,
Arsons
cases,
usually do that. Yeah.
And it happens in other cases as well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I mean, in the 70s, we set up a group to interview people, you know, after Bundy killed the girls in the Chi Omega and injured another one. You know, we set up hoping that the person would come back.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'd be able to identify him, right?
Yeah.
He'd walk up and he would see a police officer there, you know, undercover. And when he was announced, you know, I'm Officer so-and-so with Tallahassee, he would flee, right? And you'd chase him down, catch him, and you'd have the killer. So absolutely, criminals often do that. And particularly, I should think, organized killers more than disorganized killers.
Yeah.
And this is clearly, in my mind, an organized killer.
Oh, for sure.
I said that.
For sure. Yeah. We have a question from Annette asking about DNA, and I'm sure you're familiar with like Ancestry DNA or 23andMe and that kind of stuff. She's saying, do you think the general public should participate in those DNA testing sites?
No, I
don't think so either.
Well, defense attorney, look, I fought for many years. I've been doing this as a criminal defense attorney since 2001.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't unusual. If you got arrested in the United States for a felony, they would take your fingerprints. And once they took your fingerprints, you're in the NCIC system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the National Criminal Index was designed for one particular group, and that was FBI agents in the 1960s and 70s. No one else had access to that information. And the reason was that we wanted to be able to identify modus operandi in other parts of the country. We were doing certain things then. We would use that as a lead generator.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't really using that to determine who had a criminal history.
Right.
But as time progressed, everybody wanted access to it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Firemen were getting access to it.
Wow.
Right?
It's crazy.
And now it's a federal felony for you to get that information if you're not an authorized person. But who's an authorized person? Well, an authorized person is anyone who runs a bank, anyone who runs a nursery, so the list goes on and on. Now, almost everybody can get access.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that was the beginning of the problem, because that came from fingerprints, right?
Right.
And then in probably the early 90s, 2002, 2003, I guess, they started wanting to take DNA swabs Well, I'm
Buckle
like,
swabs.
what are you talking about?
Yep.
Fingerprints, okay. It's been around a long time. We use that a
Yeah,
lot.
it's called a buckle swab.
DNA,
They
no
swab the
way.
inside of your
Now,
mouth.
let me tell you why I'm against the taking of DNA.
Hmm.
And we're seeing some of this
Can be planted
today with COVID and other things. They're manipulating the genome,
Yep.
okay, in ways that were never expected. We never expected people to be able to do that. So if you got arrested for a felony in Jacksonville, you're in a special system where they keep DNA information. And let's just say they wanted to take out every guy who wore suspenders. My DNA was part of that suspender wearing fetish. Okay. They could identify that particular gene and turn it on or off and eliminate me.
Really glad that this guy's talking about that. I did not expect this at all. And I think the interview is probably getting a little uncomfortable here. But I'm really glad that this guy is speaking up about this stuff because it needs to be heard. And he's true. He's 100% correct. And, you know, the thing about DNA too is that it can be used against you. Someone wanted to plant that. And I'm sure that he's going to talk about that as well too.
So I'm like, no, we don't want DNA out there because that's the ultimate connection for the government to me.
Right.
So
I think this interview is getting a little.
I argue with the courts constantly. No, I don't agree to the taking of my client's DNA. And it eventually got to the point where the judges would just look at me and say, okay, Dale, I hear you. I hear you. Take the DNA swab.
That's a nervous laughter. He's just a little uncomfortable.
Right.
You've been heard, denied.
Yeah. Well, but people don't understand that the use of computers has advanced our ability to analyze things at light speed.
That's right.
And I think that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
Now, it does help identify and help with individuals been falsely accused, right? And they get out of prison, they've served 30 years for a murder or rape, and they get out because it's determined that, yet it's true, somebody else did that.
Right.
Even though the individual proclaimed their innocence, that wasn't sufficient to prevent a conviction.
If you guys could hit that thumbs up
Starting
button,
tomorrow, this simple bedtime.
Take a minute to pause real quick. If you guys go down there and hit the thumbs up button, I really would appreciate it. It helps push this stream out and you know, gets more viewers like yourself that have this common interest in the in this channel.
You may not know this.
So in this case, what can we expect 6 months from now? When do you think it'll go to trial? How long do you think it will take before there's justice either being brought down or they're continuing a search?
Well, let me just say one other thing about DNA. When you provide information to a private company, you lose control of that information. So if they want to give it to the government, they may not want to give it to the government. They would get subpoenaed for that information. The result is that you don't have any protection from that. And the same is true for other aspects of the criminal justice system. If our information is now stored in the cloud, we don't control the cloud. Third party controls the cloud. So the third party can be subpoenaed to provide that information that's on my cell phone right now. I don't want that to happen.
Hit that thumbs up button, guys.
So
I really would appreciate
my
it.
option is
Please.
to
And I got a
simply
poll at
not
the
be
top.
on the
You
internet
guys
at
want to
all,
vote.
not
You think
give
Bryan
my
Kohberger
DNA,
is guilty.
which, by the way, we drop off DNA every time we go someplace.
That's right.
Okay, so it's
and that was my point earlier, is that, you know, everybody was complaining, oh, you know, there's not going to be enough evidence and this and that. They're going to be able to swab all of these areas that all these people were in and involved in. And I'm telling you, there's a lot more evidence out there that we are seeing and hearing about.
easy for the government to acquire DNA of us. Come into my house covertly. They go get a comb.
That's it.
They got all they need.
Yeah.
So
toothbrush.
It's really important for people to think about how important it is to them to know their genetic makeup and whether or not they should engage the services of a company. And once you've done that, you're in the system in a way that you can't extricate yourself ever.
That's why I would never put my DNA into any of those, DNA family tree things that you send away, the kit. I would never do that.
And people are voluntarily joining their own systems to try to figure out what they're
And
in.
that's why I think like a little bit of that is might have a little government behind those things.
Ancestry.
To get DNA.
And we're doing that with what I'm doing with you right now.
Yeah.
If they wanted to find me, it'd be a fairly simple, easy task.
Yeah.
And again, the government has equipment and gear that can monitor us, on a day-to-day basis. Now, this is not a conspiracy idea.
Right.
This is factual. There's a process called Stingray, which is a cell phone emulator, which the government leases from a company. And there is a protection agreement that they will not divulge any information concerning the operation of Stingray or information it derives. And, should they be using those things? Well, if you're the victim of a crime, you want them to use that stuff to right? You want them to do that. But at the same moment, you are giving away your right, your individual freedom to privacy. And you never know what someone else's agenda has planned for you.
That's right. Are you familiar with the software called Pegasus 2.0?
Is that an AI software?
I've heard Joe
No,
Rogan
it's a
talk
software
about
that was developed, I think, by the nation of Israel. If not, then it's by a subgroup in the nation of Israel.
Right.
So I don't know if it's the government or just a technology firm there. But
it can actually go into your phone. This is really interesting. He's going to talk about this. This software can actually be put into your phone and have complete access to your phone at all times, and you wouldn't even know it's there. It's so hard to trace it within the DNA within your phone that I believe like only the person that could put it in there can figure it out. And he's going to probably talk about this.
Essentially, they sell to third-party vendors most of the time.
Sorry, I have something in my eye.
Large governments, because they're the only people who can really afford the price tag they put on it. But you can send a text message to any person or WhatsApp message, anything. They don't even have to open it. You send them a message, and then it downloads every single thing on their phone. Every message that's ever been typed, every single picture, every video.
I haven't heard of that, but it's no doubt exists. I mean, I was aware of Carnivore,
mirror your phone,
which is a government program that searches emails for information.
Yeah.
I mean, so they've had that technology.
It's crazy how we went from Bryan Kohberger into kind of like all this weird tech stuff, and hopefully it will come back around here.
They had the Black
it's interesting to hear all this.
71 for decades before it was ever revealed.
Right.
And you got to know our government has the capability. The question is the moral and ethical reserves of individuals using that equipment.
That's right.
Because if they want to use it in a negative way, it will affect all of us negatively. But if they recognize the Constitution as having some effect on what their behavior, which should control their behavior, perhaps they'll be disinclined to use it in an improper way.
Well, I know that Pegasus 1.0 had gotten into the wrong hands, some enemies of our government. And I don't know. And they on Pegasus 1.0, you actually had to click on something and it would give you everything. Pegasus 2.0 is the next iteration of that.
Right.
And I don't know if they're selling it to Iran and Syria or if they're able to just get the information. But I think it's an interesting point of conversation that we're having. We do have a question from Alan, and I think it's an interesting thing that we haven't talked about. Just saying, why do you think that Bryan Kohberger left 2 people in the house alive?
Well, here's my thought process about that.
Oh, that's from Patty too. They both asked the same question.
The first person was downstairs, and if in fact this individual was watching from the back of the house on these other occasions where he was behaving as a voyeur might, then that individual would only have access to the upper 2 floors and would only be aware that there were people in the upper 2 floors.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I've been getting paid $1,000 a month, if not more, just from this app on my phone.
All right. It's Pegasus 2.0.
He came in that second floor. Now,
and she's like,
there's
it's
a lot
Pegasus
of discussion
2.0.
as to whether or not one of the girls, the one listed as DM, was on the second floor. And I believe she was.
Yeah.
And why she wasn't located and attacked is unknown to me. I mean, but she may have had her door locked.
Right.
The two that were adjacent across the hall from her may not have had the door locked. So
Right.
it may be something just as simple as that.
Right.
When the primary targets were likely to be on the top floor. And there are reasons I think that. I don't know that I can articulate it as well as many other people can.
Right.
But I will just tell you that the additional damage done to one of the individuals on the third floor would be indicative of an extreme anger. Typically, people are stabbed more than once or twice.
Targeted.
There's anger connected with the injury.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, it's another interesting point. Everybody thinks there's a whole lot of blood, and I've been to a lot of these kinds of cases. In the instant that it happens, people think that when you shoot somebody, there's blood everywhere. And that's untrue. That's Hollywood. It's not that. The body immediately responds to the injury by closing the skin and preventing
coagulation.
That's interesting.
Everywhere. Well, the skin is elastic, so it expands and then it contracts immediately.
Yeah.
And all sorts of, you're designed to sustain that injury and to live for a little bit of time.
Interesting.
And the same thing is true with a knife wound. If your heart stops beating, you're not going to saturate the area with blood. Now, over time, gravity can have an effect.
Sure.
And then, but I'm not entirely clear that right after post-event, there was all this blood dispersion. Now, many people would disagree with that. But I'm talking immediately after the event. I'm not talking about when the medical examiner goes to collect the bodies. I'm talking
You're talking about 4:30 in the morning.
I am.
Yeah.
What we've narrowed down to a 6-minute window.
Right.
Yeah, this guy's great. And I'm going to try to do some due diligence to see if I can get him over here on my channel. I don't know what his relationship is with Taylor. I'm sure that it's hard getting these, high profile attorneys and guests on their channel. I mean, Taylor has a much larger YouTube channel than myself, but I would love for someone like this to come on the channel and just give their perspective. But I completely agree, Justin. This guy's like, it's so soothing to just hear him talk, and he's very intelligent. And I like the way that he speaks. He's very down to earth. And doesn't use a lot of technical jargon. He's just kind of talking like one of the boys, or it's very easy to follow. But yeah, I do appreciate it. I do understand what you're saying.
Right. Mike sends a question just asking, is there any thought that you had about Bryan Kohberger possibly going back at 9 because he wanted to retrieve the knife or the knife sheath?
I think so. I've always said that all along.
Well, first off, I don't think he intentionally left it.
Right.
To begin with. Right.
Right.
He recognized later that it was certainly missing. Right. But it's dark, and we have to assume that it was dark in the house.
He has visual snow syndrome.
Right. So he doesn't see well to begin with. And how would he know where to find it unless he had a particular memory of that being, and of course that was where it was found on the third floor, of that being the first strike. It's not likely you would carry that around with you, the sheath I'm talking about. But it also demonstrates an entire lack of preparation.
Yeah.
For him to engage.
But you don't think he's done this before?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that he hadn't done it before.
That's interesting. And this is coming from a former FBI profiler and a high-powered attorney. Interesting.
Because this was done swiftly. And my original thought related to someone with some real traditional experience with this kind of attack. which wouldn't be him.
I thought it was a serial killer. I thought it was a serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
It would be somebody, that has a serious. I don't want to go into too much detail, but has a serious experiences with behaving this way on behalf of the government. Okay, and that person could certainly do this. But
so you thought initially, like, this dude's been trained in some level of the military to be able to go in swiftly.
Well, keep in mind that I never saw the bodies.
Yeah, that's true.
So we didn't know, and I still don't, how the actual cutting occurred. I mean, I don't know, and that would be helpful in determining the origins of the attacker. That would give some, but they kept that fairly close to their breast, and didn't divulge that information. But the question is a good one.
It's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Joan sends a question, and I don't know the answer to this. I've heard conflicting answers. If Bryan Kohberger has access to media in jail, either TV or internet, people talking about him essentially.
What is the real story of January 6th? Many people have asked that question.
Narcissists love to hear about themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a certain satisfaction that comes from hearing yourself elevated from being essentially a nobody.
Yeah.
Although PhD in our world means something that has meaning for us.
Yeah.
I think that he would probably delight in hearing the information and being the center of attention for all the wrong reasons, of course, but he would enjoy that position.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mickey sends a question too and says, if the FBI questions a suspect or person, if FBI questions suspect or person have never been convicted of anything, can that person retrieve the information from the FBI at a later date?
The answer to that is yes, if there's a report written. So if you're interviewed, the report is manufactured in just a clean sheet of paper. And the clean sheet of paper will say, on such and such a day, I met with so-and-so, address so-and-so, described as follows, and interviewed them concerning whatever matter it is. And then there'll be a list of Q&A, basically, right? And they advise that this is so-and-so. And that document is computer indexed now. It didn't used to be. It used to be put on index cards. That's where the term comes from, indexing. And yes, you can get access to that. You file what's known as a Freedom of Information Act, and it will take them some time to react to that. It's of interest to note too that, and I had this discussion earlier today, that the FBI has an ELSER file system, and ELSER is electronic surveillance. So if the FBI has ever picked you up on a wire or listened to your phone calls or had a consensual monitor, they have to log that, and you can have.
I wonder how many of us out there, like, literally, I wonder if I've ever been like profiled by the FBI, or you've been profiled, or this guy, Tyler's been profiled. Like, just, I wonder. You always wonder that, like, were they ever looking at me or anything like that? It's interesting to think that
as well.
They have the capabilities to do that and not even tell you.
In state governments, it's much more random, and so you don't know whether or not.
Interesting.
You have been, my clients have been pressured to engage in criminal activity because the government has tricked them. I'm talking about the state government into behaving this way. Okay. So the FBI, you can know because you can see all the contacts that the government has had with an individual. But with informants, which is typically what we work with, somebody who's wearing a wire or what's known as a phone consensual monitor, the state doesn't have any record of that.
That's very interesting. What about the NSA? I mean, we know that they're watching and listening to pretty much everything that we do. If you're 6 degrees separated from a terrorist, they're watching and listening to you, which the math is everybody's 6 degrees separated from everybody. So that basically casts a net saying they're watching and listening to us and storing it in a data farm somewhere in Nevada.
Well, you heard from Snowden that they were doing that.
We heard from Snowden they were doing that. I've studied it extensively. Is that information accessible, or is it locked away?
Locked.
That information is locked away. And there are certain things you're just not going to get. And the effort that's required to unveil that data is just
so
too
extensive.
costly.
Costly.
So there's a cost incentive to deny the access to that information. And of course, more broadly, they're going to deny that they have that.
Right.
Well, good luck. Good luck denying that to me.
well, okay, but many people don't really, they're not concerned with that. They're more interested in who won a football game. Their lives are, and they may be more pleasurable, frankly, because they don't watch the TV. They're not involved in the civil system that controls our government. They don't care. They want to go fishing, and they do, and they live, and they die. Right?
They live and they die.
And so it's up to people like you to alert people without becoming a target yourself.
Yeah.
Because the system does not like to be revealed.
That's true.
It's like the Wizard of Oz when the Toto runs up
and pulls the curtain.
Yeah.
And so you can be Toto because everybody loves animals, right? But you can't be Dorothy who looks behind the curtain.
That's right. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's a great point. Well, Dale, this has been one of the most fascinating conversations.
That's great.
And,
it was a really great conversation.
One of my favorite that I've had involving this case. I really appreciate you coming on. I know it's past your expiration date for the day, but we want to have you come back on. Everybody in the chat's like, please have him back on. Please have him back on. Please have him back on, because you carry a fatherly wisdom with you that is missing in our culture, in a world that's been sort of defunct of great wisdom from father figures today, that you've been able to share that and impart that to thousands of people. And it means a lot.
One last piece of information to you, which your listeners may find enjoyable.
Right on.
In the FBI, if there was a word of profanity in those 302s that we talked about, that word was erased out. Okay, you had the first letter and the last letter of the curse word, and then a special document was made spelling all the words out. Okay, and that was kept in a safe in the FBI office called the obscenity safe.
Therapy for me, I think
and it was not allowed to be out in the actual bullpens at all.
Right.
That's the difference, substantial difference between your generation and the generation that I come from.
I know it's huge. It's a huge difference, and you're exactly right. One of the things that I tell people that has made a huge difference is when I started kindergarten, my school had one computer. When I graduated, there was a computer at every desk. Right. And that's a massive transformation in a short amount of time. I'm somebody who studied communication theory, and it used to be newspapers and then television. And then it became social media. Right. And now we're even in a new evolution of it where it's experiential, because we can't really trust what we see and hear in the media on social media. And unless someone has an experience with something, they have a hard time believing it. And so touching and feeling it themselves makes the difference. Were there any final thoughts about the Bryan Kohberger case? Anything that we didn't mention that you wanted to say?
Important to know that he's been charged, but he hadn't been convicted. And in the United States, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Right. And I've said that extensively on this channel, that everybody that is involved or arrested or accused of a crime, they have the right to due process to go through the judicial system and fight their case. And everybody in the United States is innocent until proven guilty.
I think that's really important here. I mean, it's going to be
of innocence.
a real fair trial where he is, because of the notoriety that this matter has achieved.
Right.
And finding jurors who can just listen to the facts and listen to both sides equally. Unless that happens, then we have individuals convicted because the government is essentially saying they should be convicted instead of them being the actual perpetrator. And I have no way of knowing whether this fella is the perpetrator or someone else assisted him and did it for. I have no way of knowing. But to focus all our energy on one person, it may feel good because solution, right? But it may not ultimately be the solution.
Right.
Just keep an open mind is all I'm suggesting.
I agree with that. And that's one of the things I told you when we were having you come on. You're like, I think outside the box. I'm like, great. We're outside the box thinkers over here on this channel. And so, and I love, one of my favorite things is when you and Nancy fight. So I'm looking forward to, did you fight with her today? Because we're going to go listen to it. If you did.
Well, I jumped in on some of the conversations, but then I have fairly strong views about some things.
Good.
Talking about the fact that the government has to turn over everything, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to say what I said to
I like
you,
this guy a lot.
which is only if they're ethical.
You know what makes me laugh about her? She'll say, this is something she often says. She's like, y'all better jump in. This isn't high tea at noon at Windsor Castle. And then people start talking and she'll say, pipe it down. I'm going to mute you, Dale Carson.
That's right.
Right after she just told you to start talking.
Well, I mean, it's not unusual to have people give you two signals at the same time, right?
That's right. Well, if I was ever on Nancy Grace's show, I was like, which side of the mouth that you're talking out of do you want me to be a part of?
Well, that is it, unfortunately. And that was Tyler Feller. Please go over and subscribe to his channel. And we just had that awesome interview by attorney Dale Carson. Really good stuff over there. And please go over and subscribe. I'm going to end up wrapping this stream up for the evening. I appreciate everybody that came in and out during the chat. I saw a lot of people come over this evening. That was really cool. Be interactive. It's what we want here on this show. We want to hear your opinions as well. I put that phone number up there for anybody that wants to call in, discuss what's going on in the Kohberger case or any of the live streams that we're involved in. Tomorrow night, I will be back at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to go through the part 2 of the article of the Air Mail article, and we'll do some reading through of that and get some different perspective on Bryan Kohberger and the Idaho 4. So that is going to be it for this evening. I really do appreciate you all watching. And again, I am the opinionated idiot. And like I always say, opinions are like assholes and everybody's got one. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Thank you.